The line at the DMV stretched out the door and into the sweltering August heat. Naomi Jefferson shifted her aching feet on the cracked pavement, clutching her business license application in damp hands. She'd been waiting since 6 a.m., watching the digital display tick through numbers at a glacial pace. At 2:47 p.m., a new clerk appeared at window 12, a blonde woman with a crisp Supervisor Wilkins badge. "Last call for service today," she announced. The white man behind Naomi, who'd arrived 20 minutes ago, immediately pushed forward. "Oh, I'm next." Supervisor Wilkins smiled. "Of course, sir. Step right up." Naomi cleared her throat. "Actually, I was." The supervisor's smile vanished. Back of the line. Naomi's stomach dropped. "But I've been here since." The security guard took a step closer, his hand resting on his belt. Naomi's mouth went dry. She turned, her cheeks burning as she walked past dozens of tired faces back to the end of the line. A pregnant teenager gave her a knowing look. "Happens every time," the girl whispered, rubbing her swollen belly. At window 12, Supervisor Wilkins stamped a man's forms with efficient precision. Naomi watched her perfectly manicured nails, French tips, unchipped, tap the counter as she processed each document. That's when she noticed a small sign taped to the glass. "Now hiring, civil service exam required." The guard smirked as Naomi passed him again. "Better luck tomorrow." Outside, the sun beat down on Naomi's shoulders as she reached into her purse. Her fingers brushed against her daughter's crayon drawing from that morning. A stick figure with brown skin standing proudly behind a counter labeled "Mommy's New Job." Naomi took a deep breath, turned around, and marched back inside to grab an application form. The guard's smile faded as she walked right past him to the bulletin board, her heels clicking like a countdown on the linoleum floor. The flickering fluorescent light in Naomi's kitchen buzzed like an angry hornet as she hunched over the DMV handbook, her fingers smudging the pages with diner grease that never quite washed off. The apartment walls were thin enough to hear Mrs. Carter's television next door, some old game show where people won cars Naomi would never afford. Maya's crayon drawing fluttered from the fridge as the broken AC unit kicked on, the paper landing in a puddle of ramen broth. Naomi picked it up carefully, smoothing the wrinkled image of a stick-figure family standing in front of a house with a real front yard. Not this roach-infested walk-up with its peeling cabinets and the eviction notice that grew more ominous each day. At 3:42 a.m., the bathroom pipe burst again. Naomi caught the rusty water in the same chip-mixing bowl she'd been using for months. The landlord wouldn't fix it, just like he wouldn't fix the mold creeping up Maya's bedroom wall. She scrubbed harder at the grease stain on her only blouse, the fabric fraying under her nails. "You'll ruin it." Naomi jumped. Mrs. Carter stood in the doorway holding a garment bag, her slippers whispering across the linoleum. Inside hung a pristine white button-down, the creases still sharp after decades in a cedar chest. "My Henry wore this when they told him black men couldn't teach advanced math," she said, running a knotted finger along the collar. "He proved them wrong in this very shirt." The fabric smelled like mothballs and pride. Naomi opened her mouth to refuse, but Mrs. Carter was already buttoning Maya into her winter coat. "Come, child," she said to the sleepy girl. "Let's give your mama some studying time." As the door clicked shut, Naomi pressed the shirt to her face and inhaled courage. The exam proctor didn't bother hiding his smirk when she walked in. His eyes lingered on the two large cuffs covering her work-roughened hands. "Section C is for commercial licenses," he said too loudly. "You sure you don't want to start with the basic test?" Naomi took her seat between two fresh-faced college kids who scooted their chairs away. The test booklet crackled as she opened it, the scent of new paper mixing with the proctor's cheap cologne. She worked methodically, tuning out his exaggerated size each time she turned a page. When the scores posted, the proctor's pen hovered over her 98% like he was waiting for the numbers to change. "Must be some mistake," he muttered. Naomi plucked the paper from his hands. "No," she said sweetly. "Just the beginning." Outside, the rain had stopped. Mrs. Carter waited on the bench with Maya, who proudly waved a new drawing, this one of her mother wearing a superhero cape. Naomi tucked it carefully into the pocket of Henry's shirt, right over her heart. The civil service list would take weeks. The eviction notice gave her 7 days. But for the first time in years, Naomi walked home with her head high, her daughter's small hand warm in hers. The battle wasn't won, but she'd finally found her weapon. The DMV training room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee, the fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped flies. Naomi sat ramrod straight in her borrowed shirt, the collar stiff against her neck. 20 new hires filled the chairs, 18 of them white, most barely out of high school, all chatting like this was just another summer job. At the front of the room, Supervisor Wilkins adjusted her pearl necklace and smiled. "Welcome to your future." Her gaze skipped right over Naomi, like she was part of the furniture. The training manual hit Naomi's desk with a thud. "Section 5, Document Verification," Wilkins said. "Pay special attention. We don't accept mistakes here." The exaggerated pause on the word made the girl next to Naomi giggle into her manicured hand. Naomi kept her eyes on the material. She'd memorized every regulation weeks ago. The public library computer lab was empty at midnight. Naomi squinted at the pixelated screen, typing DMV hiring loopholes with one hand while rocking Maya's stroller with the other. A faded forum post caught her eye. "They'll tell you to wait for the civil service list, but mayoral appointments bypass the queue." Present day. Wilkins's heels clicked as she circled the room. "Let's practice, shall we, Miss?" She pretended to check her clipboard. "Jefferson, you're at window 12. A customer hands you an out-of-state license and birth certificate. What do you do?" Naomi didn't blink. "Verify the birth certificate against the primary ID database, then cross-reference with the National Driver Registry. If the hologram..." "We don't have time for theatrics," Wilkins snapped. "Just check the boxes." The lunch bell rang. Naomi opened her brown bag to find Mrs. Carter's famous cornbread wrapped in wax paper, and a note. "Henry's shirt gets him every time." She was still smiling when she noticed her chair. Someone had scrawled "back of the line" across the seat in permanent marker. The training room door burst open. A pregnant teen, the same one from the DMV line months ago, stood panting at window 12. Wilkins immediately reached for the intercom. "Security too." "Wait." Naomi stepped forward. "She just needs the prenatal care form." Wilkins's eyes narrowed. "You don't make the rules here." Naomi completed the form perfectly anyway. As the girl left, she pressed a crumpled flyer into Naomi's hand. "Community Legal Aid, know your rights." That night, Naomi found a typed notice in her locker. Complaint number 302, insubordination. She pinned it next to Maya's new drawing. This one of her mom behind a counter, helping people. The DMV waiting area reeked of winter coats and frustration as Naomi stamped another form, her fingers numb from the broken heater blasting cold air directly over window 12. 3 months into the job, she developed a reputation. The pregnant teens, the elderly black voters, the Spanish-speaking mothers all migrated to her line, like birds sensing a storm. Today it was Mr. Johnson from her building, his gnarled hands shaking as he presented documents Wilkins had just rejected at window 3. "Told me my birth certificate looked fake," he whispered, the yellowed paper trembling in his grip. The 1938 document bore the telltale, colored, stamped Mississippi used back then. Naomi processed it without comment, ignoring the heat of Wilkins's stare burning holes in her back. At closing time, Wilkins cornered her by the time clock. "We don't give special treatment." Her pearl necklace clicked against her teeth as she spoke. Naomi kept punching out. "Neither do I." That night in her apartment, the evidence notebook grew heavier. Page after page of dates, names, violations, denied applications for trivial reasons, lost payments that somehow always happened to black and brown applicants. Maya colored beside her at the kitchen table, crayon scratching against paper as Naomi's pen scratched out justice. Flashback, 2 weeks prior. The employee bathroom mirror reflected Naomi's exhaustion as she splashed water on her face. The stall door creaked open behind her, lured the pregnant teen from training, now showing in her 3rd trimester, slipping a folded flyer into Naomi's pocket. "For when you're ready," she whispered before disappearing. The paper read, Community legal aid, documenting workplace discrimination. Present day. The mayor's aide sat across from Naomi in the diner booth, steaming coffee untouched between them. Naomi pushed a notebook across the chipped formica. 347 cases. And counting. The aide's polished fingernail tapped a particular entry. The elderly man's birth certificate. They're still using the fraudulent document excuse. She flipped to a photo of Naomi's defaced workstation. And this is textbook hostile work environment. Outside, the first snow of winter began falling. Naomi watched it coat the sidewalk where Wilkins' BMW was parked illegally in the handicap spot. As usual, the aide followed her gaze. We'll need sworn affidavits. From your special applicants. Naomi's fingers traced the crayon smudges on the notebook's edge where Maya had helped. She thought of Mr. Johnson's grateful tears, of Lourdes' baby who'd need ID someday, of the line of people Wilkins turned away daily who still saw window 12 as a beacon. I know just where to start. The bell over the diner door jingled as they stepped out into the cold, their breaths mingling in the air like promises. Somewhere across town, Wilkins slept soundly in her suburban home, unaware the woman she'd sent to the back of the line was coming for everything. The disciplinary hearing room smelled like old coffee and new carpet, the long table polished enough to reflect Naomi's steady hands as she arranged her evidence. Wilkins sat across from her, perfectly coiffed, her lawyer whispering last-minute advice. They didn't notice the back door crack open, the pregnant teen from the DMV line slipping in with her now 6-month-old baby, followed by Mr. Johnson and a dozen others from window 12. The commissioner adjusted his glasses. This is highly irregular. Naomi pressed play on the recorder. Wilkins's voice filled the room, crisp and venomous. We don't help them. We process. There's a difference. The mayor's aide entered then, carrying a stack of sworn affidavits thick as a phone book. Wilkins's lawyers started sweating. One by one, the people from window 12 stood. Lourdes bouncing her baby. She said my Puerto Rican birth certificate was fake. Mr. Johnson, trembling hands holding his cane, made me take the eye test 6 times till I failed. A young black mother told me to come back when I could speak proper English. Wilkins stood abruptly, her chair screeching. This is a witch hunt. Naomi didn't blink. She simply slid forward the final piece, security footage of Wilkins pocketing cash payments from white applicants to expedite their paperwork. The gavel came down like Judgment Day. Outside, reporters swarmed. What's next? They shouted. Naomi looked past them to where Maya waited with Mrs. Carter, the little girl proudly wearing a homemade window 12 badge. Change, Naomi said. The next morning, her old workstation gleamed under new signage. Supervisor Jefferson. Wilkins's empty office smelled of disinfectant and fresh paint. On the desk, a single sticky note in Naomi's precise handwriting. The back of the line is now the front. The scent of fresh paint and new carpet filled the renovated DMV lobby as Naomi adjusted her daughter's tiny blazer. Maya fidgeted with excitement, her patent leather shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Outside, a crowd had gathered behind the velvet rope, not the usual frustrated applicants, but beaming families holding balloons and cameras. The elderly Mr. Johnson stood proudly at the front, his Sunday best neatly pressed. The cataract surgery Naomi had helped him get through city health benefits, now allowing him to see the ceremony clearly. Lourdes bounced her toddler on one hip while handing out programs with her free hand. She traded the stained envelope from her first visit for a crisp staff badge that read bilingual processor. When she caught Naomi's eye, she mouthed thank you for the 100th time since getting hired. The mayor's speech droned on about equity and progress, but Naomi's attention was drawn to the back of the room. There, half hidden behind a pillar, stood Wilkins. Her once impeccable blonde bob had grown out into ragged gray streaks, her trademark pearl necklace noticeably absent. She clutched a coffee cup like a lifeline, her eyes darting between the crowd and the exit. Naomi excused herself and made her way through the crowd. Wilkins stiffened as she approached, her knuckles whitening around the disposable cup. You came, Naomi said simply. Wilkins's gaze dropped to the shiny new, Fair Chance DMV logo on the wall. Had to see it for myself. Her voice carried none of its old bite. All this, over some paperwork. Naomi studied the woman who'd once reduced her to tears. The foundation caked in her wrinkles. The nervous tremor in her left hand. The faint whiskey scent beneath her drugstore perfume. This broken woman was a far cry from the villain of her memories. Not paperwork, Naomi corrected gently. People. A crash interrupted them. Maya had knocked over a display of brochures, sending colorful papers fluttering everywhere. Before Naomi could move, Wilkins was on her knees gathering them up, her motions quick and practiced from years of maintaining perfect order. Maya froze when she saw who was helping, her big eyes wide. Wilkins hesitated, then held out a pamphlet about voter registration. "Here you go, sweetheart." Maya took it carefully. "Thank you, miss." She trailed off, unsure. "Janice," Wilkins supplied quietly. "My name is Janice." Naomi felt something shift in her chest. She reached into her pocket and produced a business card for the city's new equity training program. "We start next Monday," she said. "Could use someone who knows the old system inside out." Wilkins's breath hitched. The card trembled in her fingers. "Why?" The word came out raw, stripped bare. Naomi watched Maya scamper back to Lourdes, proudly showing off her salvage brochure. "Because I don't want her fighting the same battles I did," she said softly. Then louder, "Be here at 8. Sharp." As she walked away to rejoin the ceremony, Naomi didn't look back. But she knew, with the same certainty that had guided her through every Window 12 intervention, that Janice Wilkins would show up. And for the first time in her life, she'd be the one waiting at the front of the line. The first snow of winter dusted the sidewalks outside the Fair Chance DMV as Naomi unlocked the doors at 7:30 a.m., a habit she'd kept since her Window 12 days. Inside, the scent of fresh coffee mixed with the peppermint candles Lourdes insisted on burning at the front desk. At Window 12, now rebranded as the Community Assistance Station, a new hire fumbled with the computer login. Naomi recognized the nervous tremor in his hands, the two big blazer sleeves. Malik, age 19, had been Maya's first client when she set up her makeshift kids DMV booth at last year's career day. "Need help?" Naomi asked. Malik flushed. "Just don't want to mess up, Ms. Jefferson." She adjusted his tie, the same navy blue as Henry's shirt, now framed in the lobby beside Maya's drawings. "Pro tip," she whispered. "The system's designed to make people like us fail. So cheat." She tapped his keyboard with a grin. Alt plus F5 pulls up the undocumented language toggle. His shocked laugh echoed through the empty lobby. The bell chimed. Janice Wilkins stood in the doorway, her coat damp with melting snowflakes. She held a bakery box and a stack of papers. "Morning," she said, stiff but steady. "Brought donuts. And this." Naomi flipped through the pages, a meticulously detailed proposal for an outreach program to help formerly incarcerated people get IDs. The margins were crammed with notes in Wilkins's precise handwriting. "Check with Lourdes. Translation needs, and Malik could lead tech literacy portion." Across the room, Maya, now sporting her own miniature staff badge as the official kid ambassador, gasped. "Miss Janice, you came back." Wilkins's stern facade cracked as the girl barreled into her for a hug. Over Maya's head, her eyes met Naomi's. Not quite friends, not quite forgiven, but something new, something better. Naomi handed her a keycard. "Welcome to the team, Janice." Outside, the snow fell heavier now, blanketing the old DMV parking lot where so many had waited in vain. Inside, the coffee brewed, the computers hummed, and the first applicants of the day began to arrive, each greeted not with suspicion, but with Maya's booming, practiced. The autumn leaves swirled outside the DMV's floor-to-ceiling windows as Naomi adjusted the lapels of her tailored blazer, a far cry from Henry's borrowed shirt all those years ago. At 55, her hair was now streaked with silver, but her hands remained steady as she pinned a new badge to her chest. Commissioner Jefferson. The renovated lobby buzzed with activity in a dozen languages. At Window 12, Malik, now a regional manager, coached a new hire through a complicated case. Nearby, Lourdes' daughter, now a college intern, helped an elderly couple navigate the tablet kiosks. The bell chimed. A young black woman entered, her shoulders tense as she clutched a business license application. Naomi watched her scan the room warily, the same defensive posture she herself had worn decades ago. Then Maya appeared, her daughter, now 25, and the DMV's youngest ever community director, greeted the woman with a warm handshake. "Welcome. Let's get you started." Naomi's throat tightened. Somewhere in the back, Janice Wilkins, retired but still volunteering every Tuesday, nodded in approval. Outside, the wind carried away the last of the autumn leaves, making room for winter's transformation. Inside, the circle remained unbroken,